So good news there from Mission Control. And our next major countdown event will be around the...
And SpaceX Freedom. We can confirm our displays are configured for launch. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the entire team around the world for your hard work and dedication to get us to this point. Alex and I are ready and honored to represent you and everyone back on Earth. A huge thanks to our families and friends for your unwavering support, and to Crew-9, unbreakable. We go together.
SpaceX copies. You've proven you're ready, Dragon, and we're looking forward to seeing a full capsule at splashdown.
Really exciting commentary there from Commander Nick Hague. And with that, we are just about 9.5 minutes to launch. And right now, the Falcon 9 launch commit criteria are being checked by our onboard computers. Those launch commit criteria are specific thresholds and data that tell us that the rocket is healthy. There are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we're approaching terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks.
Just coming up on 9 minutes before launch. Right now, we just heard from Commander Nick Hague. He and Alexander Gorbanov are suited. They are seated in Dragon Freedom there, as you can see on the screen. We have teams here at Mission Control Hawthorne monitoring the vehicle, both Dragon and Falcon 9. Meanwhile, in Houston, as we heard from Nilifer, some of those teams in console positions are keeping tabs on the space station, its reboost capabilities, making sure everything is looking good for Dragon's arrival tomorrow. We're looking at about a 9-minute ride to orbit today, and that's the point that the second stage will cut off. After that, Dragon and the second stage will continue to coast for another few minutes, and then they will separate. You'll be hearing some performance calls as we get into this final countdown, and then after liftoff. These are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. And there are also some other calls you'll hear the crew make after liftoff. The crew will report out on a few number and letter combinations, and these mark different abort zones through the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1A and 1B, and these are available when the first stage is firing. The next are 2A through 2E. Those will come into play once the second stage kicks in, but we will only hear the call for 2A. Diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will also hear the call Shannon, and that refers to Shannon, Ireland. That means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort later in the second stage burn. Again, you'll hear these calls throughout the flight uphill, along with the key performance callouts from the guidance, navigation, and control officer, as well as the propulsion lead.
One of the next callouts we're listening for in our countdown is the announcement that Stage 1 engine chill has started, which is one of the key processes that prepares the engines on board our first stage for flight. Right now, propellant in the tanks is isolated from the engines, but at T-minus 7 minutes, we'll open the engine pre-valves and start passing just a trickle of liquid oxygen through the Merlin engine pumps, chilling those engines for the start sequence.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
Confirmation there that engine chill has started. Now, we do this because the super chilled and densified liquid oxygen on board is really, really cold. So we use the process to bring that engine hardware down to a cooler temperature before flowing all of the LOX and propellant into it during flight. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us to prevent thermal shock and ensures nominal engine performance. The next thing we're listening in for is the confirmation that RP1 load has been completed on board Stage 1.
RP1 is that densified kerosene or rocket fuel that propels the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is fully, or we are waiting to hear that it is fully loaded onto the rocket, and the second stage loading was completed earlier. So we're still loading liquid oxygen as well on the first and second stages.
Stage 1 fuel load is complete.
Confirmation right on time that RP1, the densified kerosene loading, is now complete. Again, still loading liquid oxygen on the first and second stages. We need this to combine with the densified kerosene. That RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up next at the 5-minute mark, we'll hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power. And then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, which means they'll have some additional rigidity and structural support for the rocket as we get ready for the strong back to retract. The strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both prop load and the different gases being loaded on board. The clamp arms will open and it'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we will see it swing open completely at the moment of liftoff. We'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the 2-minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
Dragon in configure for terminal count.
Now under 5 minutes to launch, we are in terminal count, meaning the Dragon onboard computers take control of the spacecraft. Again, we are still watching first stage as its liquid oxygen loading continues. That'll be complete around 3 minutes, followed by completion of second stage liquid oxygen loading about 1 minute later.
Strong back retract has started.
Just heard that call out from mission control that strong back retract has started. And if we keep a close eye on the screen, there we go, just coming out of those clouds of liquid oxygen, we got to see those clamp arms opening up around stage 2. What's going to happen now is that our strong back will recline just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle. But the TE will throw back all the way to 45 degrees at liftoff, clearing the way for Falcon 9 to leave the pad. As Leah mentioned, that strong back does route the vehicle's fluid and telemetry lines all the way up to the rocket and our spacecraft today. Good views of the strong back moving away from Falcon 9 and Dragon there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. With that, we are just about 30 seconds away from LOX load completion on board the first stage.
As Ronnie mentioned, standing by just about 20 seconds from now, we're expecting to hear the liquid oxygen loading will finish. Again, this is required to combine with that RP1, the densified kerosene, to give us the chemical composition we need to propel the rocket into space. All of these white clouds of vapor you see on your screen are normal. We will continue to see them build as we get closer to launch. And that's due to this liquid oxygen. It's super chilled, so some of that does boil off in the hot Florida air.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
There's confirmation right on time.
Dragon in terminal count and on internal power.
That we both have LOX load complete on the stage 1 and that Dragon is on internal power. We are expecting LOX loading to last for just about another 30 seconds on board stage 2. And then we should see a vent down of the TE LOX lines. That's going to produce another one of those large white clouds moving away from the vehicle. Again, as Leah just mentioned, that is totally normal and happens when that cooler liquid oxygen that's venting off the surface of the tanks comes into contact with that humid Florida air along the Space Coast.
We're standing by now for stage 2 liquid oxygen loading to be complete.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Dragon in auto idle.
With confirmation of that liquid oxygen load complete, gas closeout has...
Gas closeout has started. Expect loud venting.
Right on time, that gas closeout has begun. So we are now isolating all the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. Those will then get vented overboard through the umbilicals and the strong back itself. And you can actually hear that venting right now. Now, something else you'll see is our sound suppression technique. Our rockets are super loud, and that sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. So just before liftoff, you'll see a ton of water dumping onto the pad. This absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket, which could cause
FTS is
damage.
armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling.
Dragon in countdown.
Now that we are in countdown, the flight computer on Dragon will switch to countdown mode. And we've also heard the flight
Freedom,
termination
SpaceX.
system is armed.
Go for launch.
Freedom is go for launch.
That's our final go for launch. SpaceX reporting go and the crew reporting go.
30 seconds. -15 seconds.
Standing by for the first launch of
10,
humans
9,
from Space Launch
8,
Complex 40.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine full power. And liftoff of Crew-9. Go SpaceX, go Falcon, go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew-9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
Stage 1 Alpha.
Stage 1, propulsion is nominal.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Those 9 Merlin engines now providing 1.7 million pounds of thrust, propelling Falcon 9 and Crew 9 and continuing to get good calls from teams here on the ground.
Of course, these incredible views mean we are just a little bit past 30 minutes or 30 seconds into our 9th rotational crew mission.
Power and telemetry nominal.
On board Dragon and Falcon 9 with good callouts from mission control that everything is looking good. With that, stage 1 is throttling down to pass through max Q, which is the period of maximum dynamic pressure on Falcon 9 during ascent.
Max Q.
Confirmation of max Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
And that Falcon 9 is now traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Stage 1 throttle up.
Stage 1 Bravo.
Copy, 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage and continuing to get good performance.
And vac chill is underway.
Crew is pulling just over 2 Gs at this point. Next up, we heard the engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine has begun, and then we will have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and the second stages, and then will separate from one another. Then that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew 9 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Two minutes in, and the crew is now traveling over 2,600 miles per hour.
Stage 1 is throttling down.
Confirmation there from mission control that stage 1 is throttling down as we prepare for main engine cutoff, followed shortly thereafter by stage separation and second engine start 1. You did hear mission control out that we are chilling our
MECO.
There's confirmation of MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 Alpha.
MVAC ignition.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
With that, we have had confirmation of MECO, stage SEP, and the ignition of our MVAC engine on board stage 2. Our next major milestone is going to be the beginning of stage 1 boost back burn, which is expected in just a couple of seconds here. Of course, if you are just joining us, you've got views of our first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and of MVAC burning with our Crew 9 astronauts aboard up in space on the right-hand side of your screen.
Now we are coming up on 3 minutes and 20 seconds since liftoff today, traveling over 4,000 miles per hour and 76 miles downrange.
As our first stage makes its way back to Earth, we are tracking a landing attempt today at landing zone 1, not too far from where we lifted off in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there that both vehicles
Freedom copies nominal trajectory.
are on nominal trajectories. Everything is looking good.
And we're getting good performance on that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The crew's G-load dips right now. We are going to prepare to hit the separation event. Right now, they're about 1 G, which is about what we're used to experiencing on Earth. Crew is traveling almost 5,000 miles per hour now and 105 miles in altitude.
As we await the entry burn for our first stage, you are getting great views of it on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also see 2 of our titanium grid fins, which are the primary mechanical structures.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there from Mission Control that everything is still looking good.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
Now, as I mentioned, those grid fins are the primary mechanical structures that we use to steer the booster back toward its landing zone, which today is LZ1 at Cape Canaveral. Just as kind of a quick point of reference, those grid fins are about 4 by 5 feet, so roughly the size of a coffee table. Getting our first tracking shots of the booster on its way back to Earth. Again, we are tracking the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and MVAC up in space on the right.
And we do continue to hear good calls for that second stage. Again, we will see this continue to fire until close to 9 minutes into the flight, now at 5 minutes and 45 seconds since liftoff today. This is accelerating Dragon to more than 17,000.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
More good news.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
This second stage is bringing Dragon to more than 17,000 miles per hour. That puts our crew in orbit. And the single Merlin vacuum engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space.
Stage 1 does perform 3 burns on its way back to Earth. The first is the boost back burn, followed shortly thereafter by the entry burn. The entry burn is used by Falcon 9 to slow the vehicle down before it reaches the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectories there from Mission Control.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That entry burn is, of course, followed by the landing burn, during which time we'll light 3 of the Merlin engines on board the first stage. And we expect to see that landing burn just about a minute before we expect Dragon to be inserted into orbit. So we have 2 very exciting phases of flight, both for our first stage and our Crew-9 astronauts happening here at the same time.
Stage 2, FTS has phased.
So a great touchdown of stage 1 there just a second ago. And now, of course, we are continuing to follow our Crew-9 astronauts on their way to space.
And we continue to get good calls for this second stage, that Merlin vacuum engine continuing to fire and propel our crew, now moving over 12,600 miles per hour and 611 miles downrange. Just over 8 minutes since liftoff today, so we are expecting to see this continue to fire until just about the 9-minute mark, at which point this engine will cut off. And of course, Dragon will coast for a few minutes, still attached
Terminal
to the
guidance.
second stage.
Shannon.
That call.
Copy, Shannon.
That call is for Shannon, Ireland. That would be the abort zone if we were to abort at this point in the flight. However, we are continuing to hear good calls about Dragon's performance.
MVAC shutdown.
Confirmation of the Merlin vacuum engine shutting down.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Good news there from
And Freedom
Mission,
copies, nominal orbital insertion.
from Mission Control and our crew that we have had nominal
Dragon,
orbit insertion.
SpaceX, launch escape system disarmed.
Freedom copies, LES disarmed.
In 9 quick minutes, we now have 2 new crew members on their way to the International Space Station, having taken off from Space Launch Complex 40. The crew now being in a good or expected orbit. We'll continue to coast for these few minutes, and then we get our first views inside the capsule of our 2 crew members, Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov. They are just continuing to stay in their suits and in their seats during this dynamic portion of the flight. We're going to continue to coast for a few minutes after this second stage engine cutoff. This allows the rates and motion from that long burn to settle out. There are some small reaction thrusters on the upper stage or the upper part of the second stage that can be used to counteract any residual motion. That basically makes sure we're in a stable coast before Dragon separates from Falcon, and that'll happen about 12 minutes into the flight. So about a minute and a half from now, we expect to see Dragon actually separating from the second stage. Again, we did hear the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit. And again, this is them now in microgravity, one of them, Alexander Gorbanov, for the very first time.
So as Leah mentioned, we are now just a few minutes away from the separation of Dragon from stage 2, during which time a number of activation checkouts occur. Automatically, first we're going to be checking out 12 of the Draco maneuvering thrusters, all around the service section of the Dragon spacecraft. We're also, of course, going to get ready for that nose cone opening, which will allow Dragon to dock with the International Space Station about 28 hours from now. The nose cone stays closed for the flight uphill to help protect against all of the guidance, navigation, and control sensors and Dragon's docking adapter. It's also covering 4 of our Draco thrusters that will be used for the majority of different phasing burns required as Dragon chases down the space station. We are currently standing by for that separation, which could happen anytime in the next couple of minutes.
Currently, you can see the crew is just relaxing in their seats. They are definitely vigilant, though. They are able to monitor those crew displays in front of them, keep up with what's going on in the mission. They could take control if they needed to. However, it's been a seamless ride to space today.
Good views there, looking up into Dragon's trunk, looking at the heat shield on the bottom of Dragon that Crew-9 will use when it returns home early next year.
Dragon SpaceX, Dragon separation confirmed.
There.
And Freedom copies, good separation.
There you heard from Mission Control.
Dragon, Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. Nick, Alex, on behalf of the entire team, we thank you for flying with Falcon 9 today and wish you a great mission.
And Freedom, this is Launch Director on Countdown. On behalf of the entire SpaceX Launch and Recovery team, I'd like to extend our congratulations to the entire Crew-9 team. Zena, Stephanie, Nick, Alex, Butch, and Sunny. It's an honor to be a part of this mission with all of you. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Falcon 9 Crew-9 combo. The best bundle in the league, baby. Godspeed, Crew-9.
Couldn't say it any better. Thank you, guys. You know, we had the opportunity to meet so many people that were involved with the Falcon 9, and along the way was a sweet ride. I'm pretty sure my youngest son would say it was Sigma. Alex has got a few words to add as well.
All the agencies that made this launch possible. The Ross Cosmos, NASA, Big SpaceX. And thank you to my family and friends for their support. And also I'd like to express my gratitude to the hundreds of thousands of people around the world who are involved in the development of space technologies and to move humanity forward. Today's launch is also their accomplishment. Хочу сказать спасибо Роскосмосу, НАСА совместно со SpaceX за успешный запуск человека на орбиту, за очередной успешный запуск, и также поблагодарить родных и близких за поддержку. Спасибо.
Incredible words from our commander and great views of Dragon up in orbit on your screen right now.
Been about 14 minutes and 30 seconds since. Coming up on 15 minutes now since liftoff today. You got a quick look inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts. Nose cone deploy is in progress.
And Freedom copies all. Thank you.
Confirmation there that our nose cone deploy is underway. That means that the 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during launch and the ascent portions of flight have begun to retract. That will allow the nose cone to start to swing open and deploy. That will uncover a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Incredible views from our crew up in space on your screen right now, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to the view out of Dragon's window as they make their way to the space station.
I can only imagine. And that journey to the space station will take about 28 hours, so they won't arrive until tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, they will have the opportunity to get out of their suits, to get out of their seats as well, and kind of just enjoy the ride. They're going to shift into some off-duty time. That allows them to prepare any food that they would want to. That allows them to maybe even call down to the ground. They will also obviously get some sleep before a really big day tomorrow, monitoring the arrival and docking to the International Space Station. Of course, we're going to cover all of that live. I'm really looking forward to seeing 2 more crew members float into the orbiting laboratory. And if you're just joining us, we did lift off now at 16 minutes and 29 seconds ago. That was right on time at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 down at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We have 2 members on board Dragon today. That's NASA astronaut Nick Hague, who's serving as the commander, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov, who's making his very first flight to space. Once they arrive at the International Space Station tomorrow afternoon, they will be joining 9 other crew members on orbit. They'll be up there for about a week. A week is probably the best guess until the Crew-9 team, it is time for that crew to come home. Of course, they launched about 7 months ago at this point, and they will undock after they have completed a handover period with the Crew-9 crew, bringing them up to speed on everything that they've been working on for the last 7 months in orbit. So once they depart, we'll be back down to our typical approximately 7 people living and working aboard the International Space Station.
We are getting really spectacular views from up in space today. Shot there of our MVAC engine. We did get confirmation several minutes ago of SES-1.
We know that nose cone opening is underway as well. Those are a series of hooks and latches that allow the nose cone to open. And that nose cone is closed during launch to protect the docking hatch, to protect 4 bulkhead thrusters that we will use for some of the larger burns that help us get to the International Space Station.
One of the other things we're doing right now is going ahead and opening the ECLSS system, which stands for the Environmental Control and Life Support System, which will be activated inside of Dragon. As Leah mentioned earlier, soon our crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their spacesuits and settle in for that 28-hour ride to the International Space Station. Good views there of the opening of Dragon's nose cone on the left-hand side of your screen.
Coming up on 19 minutes since liftoff today, the crew, again, had a good orbital insertion, and that actually puts 14 people currently in low Earth orbit. That includes those living on the International Space Station right now, as well as those living on the Chinese space station. So a total of 14 humans are now not off the planet, but rather orbiting around it.
More good views from our Dragon nose cone on the left-hand side of your screen. As it very gradually swings open, obviously in space, everything we do has an equal and opposite reaction, so slow and steady really wins the race here.
Again, now 20 minutes since liftoff today. Dragon is flying free from the second stage, and it looks like they're about to enter an orbital nighttime. So now that they're at orbital velocity, that's 17,500 miles per hour, they are going to see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. Again, it was an on-time liftoff at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, and a clean ride uphill.
We've had some good communication from Mission Control up to our Crew-9 astronauts already today. One of the things you may hear every time we communicate with the crew is a slight beep beforehand. That's called a Quindar tone and actually dates all the way back to the early days of human spaceflight and is effectively a radio signal indicating that we're communicating between the crew in orbit and our Mission Control team on the ground.
We now have views back inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal nose cone opening. We do have just about 3 minutes here left in the ground station pass if you've got any fluffy stowaways you'd like to introduce.
Yeah, Freedom copies. Good Draco checkout, good nose cone opening. And I just so happen to have a furry friend with me.